Hello and welcome to another episode of Intune.Training, the place to learn how to use microphone. Intune. Yes,
you nailed it.
Gotcha. The Steve and Adam Show. Steve and Adam and Jóhannes. What's up, boys?
All good.
After 5 years of this, the intro gets a little old. All right. Let's jump right into it. This is going to be a long one, probably.
What are you talking about? It's going to be super simple. Everybody does this like straight up.
The one you've been waiting
10 minutes
for.
In and up.
Windows provisioning, all the ways.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you've been following along, we've done Mac OS and iOS and Android. We haven't done Linux because we did that one very, very recently, and
we'll get back to it. Redo it,
but it was like a couple months ago we did it, and nothing has changed. But
the one that we may come to, but it's going to be in a couple of months. I was going to say years, but months. So it'll probably be the Google Chrome OS registration.
Hey, there you go. But today, the big one, Windows OS. We are going to talk about all the different ways you can Azure AD join Windows 11 or Windows 10, but Windows 11 is going to be, because that's what we're going to focus on, and that's the right one to do. The thing we will call out right from the very beginning is there is a term that gets floated around called hybrid Azure AD join, and we want to touch on that right out of the gate because I know we're going to get questions. Hey, can you guys show how to do hybrid? The answer is no. We will not show you how to do hybrid Azure AD join during Autopilot because we don't believe you need to do it. Now, as we're saying that, I want you to hear that hybrid is absolutely a legitimate thing to be doing, and you should be doing right now for your existing on-prem domain joined devices as you're moving into the cloud. You can Intune manage those devices, all that sort of stuff. And I want to say we even talked about this in our very first video of this reboot a little bit. But just want to point that out. Hybrid join in general is fine. It's the bridge. It's helping you connect your devices to the cloud. It's a requirement to connect your devices to the cloud for anything for any existing device. The thing that we're saying is that hybrid Autopilot, doing a hybrid join during Autopilot it's a complicated mess that it works for some people in some situations, but we don't like promoting it. And we have all personally found that it has not been necessary for any scenario that we've encountered thus far. That's just us. Yeah. And so that's what we're going to focus on.
So I'm going to add to that a little bit of a diatribe because it's very important scenario and conversation. If you're running today hybrid joined, fantastic. You can start moving all your workloads over to Intune. If you want to go down that route, get that experience, and you can separate how you do that migration. You can get everything up into Intune before you go and reset your devices into AAD joined. But when you start going to that new model, start looking at all my new devices are going to be AADJ, so that in 3 years' time, you're not sitting here and going, I still need to do hybrid, because hybrid's a challenge for all organizations, especially with the move to work from home or work from anywhere, because hybrid requires line of sight to a domain controller when setting up and delays that whole build process, which means that you're going to get more calls. It means that your organization's going to sit there and go, well, do we really trust the IT department? Because they're not all that forward thinking.
Yep. So Jóhannes, how long have you been doing not hybrid Autopilot?
Well, here's the thing. I never told my employer that hybrid was an option for Autopilot. But I did look into it, and honestly, just figuring out how to make Azure AD join work with everything took less time than it would have taken to make hybrid join in Autopilot work completely.
Yeah,
it's just I think people just tend to vastly overestimate how long it takes to make Azure AD join work, and they underestimate how long it will take to make hybrid work in Autopilot by a significant amount of time.
Yep. And here's the other deal. A lot of companies are looking at this saying, oh, we have to do, you're worried about the existing devices. And so it's like, whatever I'm doing, I have to do to all the devices right away, all in one big bang. Yeah. And the reality here is that, like, I mean, in the time that it has taken us to get to Azure AD Join, we could have just turned on Windows 11 with Autopilot a year earlier as the default provisioning method and just started through a normal hardware lifecycle doing this. And honestly, like, you know, we're like 50% to Windows 11 Azure AD Join at this point. And it's slowing down a little bit. We've got, you know, there's all sorts of different factors playing into things and complexities, all, you know, not actually related to any of this. It's just outside complexities slowing things down. It's like, okay, so we're looking at it saying, all right, cool. So the next year we're going to replace a quarter of our devices because we have a 4-year life cycle. A quarter of our devices are getting replaced every year. So, you know, we know at a minimum we're going to get another batch of devices upgraded in that year. Now the clock's ticking on Windows 10. So if we don't hurry, we're going to have to in-place upgrade Windows 10 to Windows 11 and then do them Azure AD Join. So we've got that as a compelling reason to move faster. And so if you haven't started yet, use Windows 11 as your reason to get there. But the other challenge, sorry guys, I'm absolutely losing my voice at this point. I sound like I'm going through puberty. Could be both. I don't know. So Steve and I were talking about this one the other day. A lot of folks are looking for, you know, like, how do I get from my current domain join to Azure AD only? The only supported method from Microsoft at this point is to wipe the device and reimage it. And so that's why a device lifecycle is a perfect time to do it, because you're already going to be doing that. Otherwise, you have to do what we're doing is we've got to bring in people and say, all right, sorry, we got to put you in a room and we're going to wipe your device, put new Windows 11 on it, and then we're going to begin the autopilot process. And you're taking that device out of service for a bit, taking the user out of service, and you've got to either put them on a temporary machine or you know, you got to buy some time, or you got to make that autopilot process really fast. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, but ultimately the message here is you should be actively working down that path. Even if you don't have the buy-in from your company yet, you should be testing test this and get familiar and comfortable with it well before you need to start lighting this stuff up. So that's our opening intro.
Yeah, it's only taken 10 minutes.
Let's do some stuff.
So, Adam, you're saying we're going to be talking about Windows and Windows Autopilot. Do you want to share your screen and we can start going through what we're talking about when we're talking about what Autopilot is? Because I think there's one thing that we also need to discuss, and it will come up throughout the natural conversation, but one of the things we need to discuss is what is and what isn't Autopilot.
Yeah, and really, we're talking a lot about Autopilot, but really what you're saying is, yeah, we're talking about Windows provisioning, actually.
Yes.
And so, correct. Yeah, that's a good clarification.
Because Autopilot makes up a very small component. It's a very important component, but it's something that we definitely need to highlight and go, well, when we step through the actual out-of-box experience, what's Autopilot and what's not? So what we're going to do, you can see that we're in the the Intune portal. So we're going to go to devices, and from here, we're going to select enrollment under device onboarding. So the ability in here, we're going to collapse that out, and we're going to select under Windows. And you'll see that consistent experience that you've seen previously, or if this is the first time you've seen it, welcome. One thing I will add in is if you see, let's do a little bit of a divergence here, Adam, because it's really important. If you go and open up a new tab for us, and we're going to go to admin.microsoft.com. Yep, cool. Close out all that. And you select devices, and you go to Autopilot. You actually have the ability to add devices here, create profiles and configurations. While you can, please don't, because it's going to cause you some issues with Intune, because it does a subset of what you can do in the Intune portal.
Where did these things come from?
So that device is one that I've already imported for a future demo.
Okay.
And the Autopilot profile is a default one that must have been created when we created the tenant.
Interesting.
So I just wanted to call that out.
So don't use this anymore.
Yeah,
probably.
It's the same as what we had with the Store for Business configuration. You had the ability to not have to use Intune.
Cool.
We're using Intune because it does a whole heap of additional controls than what you can do in that portal.
So now that we're back here, let's at least talk through kind of vertically down the list here a little bit. We're going to jump around, but let's start here. So automatic enrollment. We already configured this in the very beginning in our previous video. So, but if you didn't watch that video, you need to make sure that you've got this enabled. And the main point here is the MDM scope needs to be set. You can absolutely choose to target it to a specific subgroup of users, but you're going to forget. You're going to do like what we did and forget it. And one day you'll be like, why can't I get in? Oh, well, you're not in the group. So yeah, once you're ready, light it up for all and you're good to go. But it works great when you're starting to just test everything out here.
Exactly.
CNAME
validation is important. We've already set that up with our DNS. But this is where we're sitting there and saying you need to have the ability to resolve your organization to the endpoints.
Yeah, and if you can't put in your domain here and validate it, you need to stop and go check that before you go any further.
Definitely.
All right, co-management settings we're not going to get into, but this would be where you would configuration manager, SCCM, whatever phrase you've used to refer to it, to set up workloads there to or the workload to auto co-manage that device during enrollment. So it'll install the configuration manager client from the Autopilot experience and push it down as part of that. And so it helps with policy ownership. And so if you've got config manager set to still own some workloads and you want Intune to own the others, it helps keep them from flip-flopping back and forth, because without this, you would get Intune policy and configuration, and then the config manager client would install later and then take over. And so anyway, we're not going down that rabbit hole, but that is if you're using config manager on-prem and you want to set that up, that's absolutely a thing to look at.
And look, we may talk about co-management in the future, but it's not priority for this call or this session today.
Correct.
The next one we're stepping into that is that device platform restriction. This is where we have the ability to control what devices can be enrolled in your tenant. So obviously you can see along the top we have Windows, Android, Mac OS, and iOS restrictions where you can put controls in place to say, well, you have to have this or that. What we're going to set up here really quickly for our all users, because it's super important in this scenario, is we're going to block personally owned Windows devices.
Well, we will eventually. So we have some fun demos set up to talk through this. So we want to leave this open. But so Jóhannes has got some, I think, really got some good commentary on why we would do some different things here.
So Autopilot is just one way of provisioning a Windows device into your organization, company, whatever. You don't need it. You can, and we're going to show this later. You can just turn on your brand new machine and sign in with your corporate credentials, and bam, bam, it's a managed device. Because the only thing that Autopilot does is streamline the out-of-box experience and force the device into a managed state.
Yeah,
that's sort of the,
Exactly.
Yeah, if you need to care about the device's security before it gets enrolled into your tenant and things like that, or if you need to prevent the user from being a local administrator by default, those types of things, that's where Autopilot really shines, because it prevents usage of the device until it's fully managed, versus the other options. You have the device. You're going to get a device that came from an unknown state coming into your tenant, and that's really the balance there of just understanding what that risk is.
It also means you can, as an IT department, you control which type of devices get enrolled into your tenant. Whereas if you just allow anything, well, anybody can enroll anything, and your organization might not be able to handle that.
Yeah, they think of it also from a IT security principle, because if an account is owned or hacked, what can happen is that if you disallow personal owned devices from being registered, they can't bring in a device that then has access to all of your corporate resources, because do you know how they got access to all your corporate resources? You went and installed it for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And we had scenarios early on when we went through this where, someone was able, they were in a test group where this was wider, it was open more, and they got on their personal computer and tried to sign into Office, and it prompted them, do you want your organization to manage your device? And he didn't say no, and it's the default. And all of a sudden he said, I'm not an administrator on my box anymore, and why do I have all these security tools installed all of a sudden? So definitely a fun experience. So learn from our mistakes, and you might want to lock this down eventually. So so for the purpose of just while we're here, let's talk about it. What you would do here is you can explicitly block the Windows platform. And actually, sorry, let me back up one step. All right. Originally, this is how this was all set up, and it was all combined. They eventually set this up so that you've got a profile for each. And see, this is so weird. It changed.
No, so what you need to do is go to restrictions and then create restriction.
Right. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. So when you click across, it makes it look like you've got a different policy for each one. You don't. It's all in one default policy where they're all combined. But if you create a new one, okay, so we're going to block personal, and now we can just do it.
So then we just flick the block
on the Windows platform here, because we're already in Windows. By the way, when we clicked in the filter, it locked it down to the platform. That's why we're seeing what we're seeing. So then we want to allow MDM enrollment, but block personally owned. And so the difference here is that MDM is where there are specific enrollment methods, Autopilot being one of them, that allow this device to be enrolled into Intune. And that's how, without having to know anything about the device in advance even. There's only certain ways you can enroll the device when it's classified as MDM. You either have to know about it, or you have to enroll it with a certain process like Autopilot.
Yep.
Okay, so this is the policy that we would configure, where we're going to block personal, and then we would assign it, obviously. But you can also make this configuration change in the default policy. It's worth noting these have priorities, and so as you have more, the top priority wins. So you can leave this one set the way it is. I wouldn't. But you can make it more restrictive. Yeah, you would make this one most restrictive and then loosen it as you go up. Yeah, that way you got to catch all. Okay,
exactly.
Anything else to say here before we move?
Nope, I think we're good.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Device limit restriction. This is just, do you care how many devices? And look, the default now, unless Steve changed this already,
change it.
It's set to 15. So this used to be
5.
Set to 5 by default, and so you get 15 as your max.
So the thing to note here, that's the Intune configuration limit. You also have the ability over an AAD to set a different number of devices per user as well.
Cool. And also this limit doesn't apply to you if you set yourself as a device enrollment manager.
Correct.
As well, but that has other implications if you leave yourself assigned to those devices. So you only want to do that on special accounts.
Yeah. And the maximum number of devices a device enrollment manager account can enroll is 1,000.
Hey, there you go. All right, enrollment notifications.
This is new.
It is. We've never even tried this one.
Yep. So what this will give us is the ability to send notifications to the employee that a device was registered, as well as you can send a message to their manager, or you can also send it to a security mailbox or something like that.
And I highly encourage you to set this up for every platform.
Yep.
Even if it's a platform you don't use.
Yes.
Put it in for all of them. It takes you minutes, like 5 minutes to do every platform.
Exactly. And the reason why is it's so your end users have the visibility to go, hey, yeah, you've done something. And if it's not them, they have the ability to go, oh, hang on, I need to go and raise a support ticket to get that device removed, etc., etc. So it comes down to empowering your users to know something's happened with their computer.
Yep. So here you go. So you can do configure the customization settings. So you can do this in the, which we did previously in the, I believe this is your tenant administration, branding and stuff. So, so anyway, I just clicked through all those things really quickly. So we'll see how that works once we go here. So now in the past, like, and I mean, there still exists. So this is sending the end user this notification. There are community solutions out there that people have built in the past where, they've had it where it'll post details about a device enrollment into Teams. So you can set up a webhook and post it into Teams or do other things like that. So that stuff's kind of cool as well. The idea here is you just want a user to know that, hey, someone enrolled a device in your name. Was it you? Yep. If it was, great, awesome. But you can also provide, great info after the fact. Like, all right, now that you've got a new device, here's what we need you to know. Here's your next steps that you should do.
Here's your day 2 documentation.
Yep. Okay, moving along. Hello for business.
That's fantastic.
Don't do anything here, really, ever. Honestly, there are better ways, different ways to do this.
Why not, Adam?
Well, because this setting is applied to all users, and that's it. And that
makes sense to me.
And you can't override it. You can't configure it anyway. You can't exclude people from this. You're just, hey, everybody's got hello enabled, and that's it. Yep. And if you don't want that, and you want to roll it out carefully and target things differently, like we've got devices used by multiple people, we don't want hello enabled on those boxes right now because we don't have a great way to manage that. So how do you exclude those from that policy? Not a great experience.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a very important one to make sure you disable.
We're not saying don't do hello for business. We'll cover that in a later video. We're saying don't do it here. Not a great experience. Okay, so we've got devices. We'll come back and visit that one in a minute. We've got deployment profiles, enrollment status page. That's our next two. And then this one down here, don't you dare
We're going
touch
to ignore.
Leave it alone.
I'm just going to add, I've never actually successfully implemented the Intune connector for Active Directory.
Oh, I've done it. It works fine. But don't do it. It's not great. Learned very quickly. That's not a great experience. Okay, so there are two major components of Autopilot now that we've got down here. So for Autopilot specifically, this is where we're going. So we're going to set up a deployment profile. So this is going to customize the Autopilot provisioning experience and then the enrollment status page. These two really go together hand in hand. But enrollment status page has an interesting feature where it shows up at random times on machines the first time you log in, sometimes even if it's not part of Autopilot. So
we'll talk more about that when we go and create a profile for that one. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly drop that profile, Adam.
Yeah, I don't know where that one even came from.
It will have come from tenant provisioning.
Okay. Because of how this tenant was created. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It wouldn't normally be in most people's tenants. We got a custom tenant made here. So okay.
Yep. So what we're doing here is we're creating a very simple Autopilot profile. That setting, the convert all targeted devices to autopilot, is fantastic. If you hit that to yes, and then you grab a group of devices for the AAD group, it will convert those. But Jóhannes is going to say something here.
It's really
will
fun.
convert the device once.
Once.
Correct.
Yeah, if you delete the object, it will never get converted again, ever.
Yeah.
This wasn't particularly well documented a few years ago. I believe that has changed.
But the mechanism behind it makes sense to me, because if you want to remove a device from it for whatever reason, and you don't want to be fighting this policy where it keeps re-registering it. So it makes sense that, hey, once it's registered, leave it alone, and it's all good. Okay, so let's talk through deployment modes. So Steve, cover this, please.
Okay, so user-driven is where a user is going to sign into the device, go through that whole process. The self-deploying, I've not tested that.
We have,
because
and it's great.
Yeah,
So
I have as well.
I thought that was system deployed. Self-deployed is for chaos, isn't it? Or is it?
Well, Jóhannes can.
I'll touch on that. So with user-driven, you turn on the machine and you sign in. You have to your username, password, and then you kick off the whole process.
Correct.
Self-deploy, you plug the device into network and electrical power, turn the machine on, and then you're hands-free. It will do
so it's the chaos model.
Yes and no. So initially, and it's discussed in all. It's usually discussed in the context of it's for kiosk, it's for digital signage, it's for that sort of thing. However, there are very valid scenarios. For example, in education, where you have 3,000 lab machines. Nobody is going to be walking to each and every one of those and signing in to provision those devices.
So we were doing that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, so if you've got actually, we talked through this with someone on Discord not too long ago, I believe, where that's the scenario. So you've got these devices; they're managed by Intune or managed by even managed by Config Manager, and you can wipe them and get them back to Ubi. Get them back to Ubi. However, you're going to get them back to the out-of-box experience. Sorry, if we're saying Ubi, that's what the out-of-box experience. And the moment it connects back in, the thing will just reprovision itself and sit there. It won't be assigned to a primary user, as would be the result of user-driven. But many times that's a multi-user box anyway, and you don't care.
So there are a few caveats to this, though. User-driven is very simple and very reliable. Self-deploy is slow because it has to go through this whole hardware attestation, because there's nothing it has to authenticate itself somehow. And as far as reliability goes, if you're doing this on brand new hardware that you bought this year, you're going to have a very high level of success. If you're doing this on 5-year-old hardware, it's going to be very hit and miss.
Yeah, you've got BIOS and firmware and all sorts of other factors. The main thing about it as well. So this, as well as there's another mode that we'll talk through that is a pre-provision mode. And both of these require the device to be pre-registered in your tenant. We'll talk through how to do that in a moment. And you cannot do them on virtual devices. So the deal is, what you're doing with this is you're saying, I want you to trust this device and provision this device for me. And I want to implicitly trust that this device is my device. And the only way to do that is you have to have physical hardware with a TPM that is trusted by that can be trusted by Microsoft, and by nature, virtual TPM is not trusted unless Steve has something else to add. And my God, just speak up already.
It needs to be a TPM 2.0 certified device. You can't, if it's not 2.0, it won't work for self-driven or pre-provisioning. And the reason for that is because of the controls that exist in the attestation for the TPM.
Yep.
And,
Okay,
if it's on a virtual machine or like Hyper-V or VMware, even though it will represent in the OS to say that it is a TPM 2.0, it's explicitly been stated this won't work in the code base because there's a level of trust associated with it.
I will add to that you need TPM 2.0. You need to be, ideally, you have to update the firmware for the TPM. And for those of you who haven't done that at scale, it's not fun. And you probably have to be on the latest version of BIOS as well.
Yep.
Self-deploy or pre-provisioning, it has some caveats, and you need to take that into consideration.
Also, fun fact on this, when Windows 365 first shipped, Windows 365 is basically just virtual machines running in Microsoft's cloud in Azure. And as we stated, you can't auto provision with a virtual TPM. And so when they shipped Windows 365, it was configured you could only do it with hybrid join, which was hilarious. It was like, wait, what? This cool modern thing in the cloud, and we've got a hybrid join it? What in the world? They have since overcome that. And they've since added that functionality as well to Azure Virtual Desktop. So now when you provision an Azure Virtual Desktop, which is basically almost the same as Windows 365, not as cool, not as easy to provision, but ultimately it's a VM running in Azure. You can now do Azure AD join there. But if you're using a third party, such as Citrix or VMware or things like that, I can speak to Citrix, not so much to the VMware side. You can't do this unless you're building it on top of Azure Virtual Desktop. What I mean to say is you have to do it on Microsoft hardware, on Microsoft virtual devices, virtual hardware. You can't do it on your own, bring your own hardware. You can't do it on your on-prem Citrix stack or your cloud-based Nutanix stack. That stuff is not supported as of the recording of this video. Maybe that'll change in the future, but those are still some limitations around being able to provision virtual devices using, fully provision them as a device instead of having to have user interaction there. All right, so we've gone way down the rabbit hole on this, but like we were joking about this before. Like, okay, there's all this documentation around all this stuff, and you could sit here and you can go through all of the docs on Autopilot and all the things, and there's a ton of stuff here, and it's great. We've done it, and we're trying to distill that information down into the best possible way. And here you go. Here's a nice table. Like, here's all the different ways you can do Autopilot, and all the things that we've talked about. And so certainly if you want to go back and read through this or even prove us wrong on half the stuff we said here, certainly let us know. But there's tons of information about each one of these scenarios that we've talked through. Hopefully we've distilled it enough to where you got a good idea what you're looking for moving forward. So while we're sitting here, we're going to go ahead and set up our profile. So we're going to do user driven. We're going to do Azure AD join. We're going to hide this. We're going to hide this. Know that if you do this, it prevents the time zone thing from auto turning on. We've got a whole different thing around that. But if you show it, then the user can hit no and not turn it on, and still the same problem. It's annoying. We're going to make our user accounts a standard user. We're going to allow pre-provision deployment because we'll be able to reuse this profile for one of the demos we'll do. Then
and the thing to note with that, with the allow pre-provision deployment is, and we'll go through this future in our demo, you can set this profile there and nobody ever knows that setting's there, so you can have a consistent experience.
Yeah, exactly. All right, and then the language, this is up to you. We're going to do the operating system default. And then you can automatically configure the keyboard, which is basically based on the language.
Going to throw a flag on
go
the
ahead.
plate here. So if you go here and set your language to certain languages and then you set automatic configure keyboard, make sure you test this, validate it in your environment that the keyboard matches what you actually need it to be.
Yes.
Because certain languages, they will default to certain keyboard types that don't necessarily reflect what you're using in real life. Australia has this issue, and I'm sure there's various countries in the EU that run into this issue. So
I think Jóhannes was just complaining about this earlier today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dealing with languages is not fun. Welcome to Europe.
Yes. And then you'll note there that Adam selected the apply device name template. He's done that to wind us up because
Yes,
you should never apply a device name template because why do you need it? Everything in Intune is tied back to an BYOD and or the user that registered that device. So like putting serial number in your device name, what's it for? It's already captured in a field. I can pull that information back easily.
no, you can't easily.
Yes, you can.
You
It's just
can't.
graphical.
You can't. No. Oh, yeah. That's not easily, Steve. So the argument here is that I absolutely 100% agree with let's not name our devices with a custom template and all that sort of stuff. Historically, in my environment, we would do a site code, prefix, and then we do the last 8 of the serial number. And so everything was very, very consistent in that way. So then you could very quickly identify, like, here's what site the device belongs to. Well, moving to user-centric, I know what site the user's at, and I can then infer that information into the device and stamp it on the device in another way. The main thing about the serial number that makes it a nice thing to use, if you're going to use anything instead of doing the random bit here, is that it does allow any tech to look in Intune or look into Azure AD and match a device to a record with what's available in the GUI within the console natively. What you're describing about going in a graph and pulling it and getting the serial number, totally valid if that's where you're living and working on this stuff. But, I'm looking at my techs out in the field saying, at least let me give them a little something. So serial number, I'm not crafting anything custom here, but I'm taking something that already exists on the device and just stamping it as its name. And to me, that feels like a good compromise. But that's where I'm at. So do what you want to with that. But the other thing is, if you want to do something crazy with your naming, this doesn't support a lot of that unless you were to do. So like if you said, I have to have X, naming on my stuff, the way you would do that here is you would set up your custom naming template. And so like if your device is going to be HQ- serial number, great. Then you need to identify and curate a target device group. So you have to pre-identify all the devices that are going to be headquarters devices and then put them in a custom group in order to be able to target them with this way. Now there's other ways to do this too with dynamic naming and all sorts of other
and
after the fact
also
stuff.
You can send out a CSP to the device with names and all of that, like one of the partners did at one of my customers. But they targeted users, so yeah, please don't do that.
Yeah. And you can assign a desired host name to the Autopilot object itself. And you can do whatever you want there.
Yes. Yeah. And we haven't even seen that screen yet. So, and we are already 40 minutes in and we haven't even started anything. So, but I swear we're going as fast as we can. There's a lot to this. Okay. So anyway, we could go on and on about device names. We're going to go Adam's way this time because it just makes
Adam wins.
Yeah. Okay. So if we wanted to do any special targeting here, we could absolutely do it.
Which we will need to.
We will eventually, but not right. Well, because we need to know the device group and we don't want to know that right now. Actually,
won't work.
we just won't do self-deploy mode. We'll do
Yeah.
we'll do pre-provisioning instead. It'll be close enough. Which as you should go ahead and register it while we're talking through this anyway. Because we're going to need it to be registered. Okay. So we've now created a deployment profile. We're going to back out, and then we're going to talk about the enrollment status page. Last little bit before we get rolling here. Here we go. So
we have the default, which for most organizations should be enough.
Yeah. And ideally it's set to no, and you never see it, and it's all good. However, sometimes we've seen it show up randomly. All right. So we're going to go in here and we're going to create ESP. And by the way, use better naming conventions than we're doing. We don't care, but you need to do better naming conventions for things. It's a good practice. Okay. So a couple quick things here. So we do want to show the progress. Some people, maybe you don't. You just want to get to the desktop, and who cares? If you care about showing the user what's going on, if you care about showing, like, stopping, like we talked about earlier, you want to make sure the device is secured and has things on it before a user can get to the desktop and start screwing around with it. Great. You want to show the progress, and it'll block the device until enrollment is complete.
Yeah.
You can customize this to set up the error message and who to call and all that sort of stuff. Go ahead, Jóhannes.
I generally, if you scroll up a little bit, that show an error when an installation takes longer than a specified number of minutes. I highly encourage people not to set a ridiculously high value. That
Or a ridiculously low number.
Or a ridiculously low number. Like 30, 60 minutes.
Yeah.
That tends to be the sweet spot.
So
90 minutes is a long time if you're a user who just wants to get to work.
But I say, like, so for me, I'm looking at it saying, how long on average am I seeing my autopilot deployment take? And then I want to add a little buffer on top of that. And you want to make sure you're testing that globally at slow links, and go to Starbucks and try it, or whatever, like do it over a hotspot. Make sure that you've got all your scenarios covered for all the different types of times. Or if you're seeing that, hey, this is really timing out, you might want to target maybe a subgroup of users with a no progress or something like that, so you can speed up the experience there. So good.
Or what you can do is you can move deployments into the user profile and user policy instead of system, and disable the user, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yes. All right. So then only show the page to devices provision with the out-of-box experience. So this is what I was talking about before. This used to not exist. They've added it. It seems to work generally. But at some point when you had this targeted, you'd get the out-of-box experience on random devices when they first signed in.
Ben and I may have impacted a CIO from being able to work for a very important meeting by not having that sitting there.
Yeah, how about that? So this is one that we're going to talk about a little bit. So this is the block the device use until all apps and profiles are installed. So if you set this to no, it's gonna do the initial registration, join the device to Azure AD and Intune, and then you're going to get to the desktop. It's quickest way in, basically. It's almost equivalent to doing this one. I honestly don't know the difference between setting this to no and setting this to no. Are they equivalent? Is this one even less dialogue? I would expect.
I don't know. I've not tested.
Be interesting to know. Someone will tell us in the comments. I'd love to know.
Oh yeah.
Thanks for making it this far in the video. Okay, so I'm going fast. Okay, so this one is a good one. I always like to set this one to yes. You can reset the device, because if you're out in the field, how the heck is the user going to put the OS back on it if you brick it somehow, if they lose connectivity and it has a problem? Allow the users to use a device if installation error occurs. You may find that you're just okay with this one. It's not a bad deal, because it basically lets a user log in even though an error occurred.
I would say if you're deploying very important security software during Autopilot, then you should set this to no. If it's just productivity apps like Notepad++ and Office, just set it to yes. No one cares. Or if you're doing pre-provisioning versus deploying, like sending it out into the field. Like if you're
mailing a bunch of devices to users, you definitely kind of want to set this one so that because ideally you have an opportunity to get back into that device remotely with that user to help them fix it in the field versus it sitting on your bench.
Well, and that's exactly it. Without needing to send an expensive IT resource out to troubleshoot and triage an issue that is remote to where your users are. And it looks like we're doing another divergent conversation here.
Well, we got to the point in the deal where we need to do that thing that we said we were going to do that we didn't do yet. Okay, so I've quickly jumped over to the apps node. What we want to do is we're going to go and add a Microsoft Store app, and we're going to go grab the company portal app. And you'll notice how much nicer this is. We didn't have to go and connect our business to the business, the store for business and all that stuff. The key thing to do here is make sure you select system. And I would highly recommend this, unless you have some other reason not to do this. On every store app you bring in, just get in the habit of clicking system. It's just a far better experience because it'll install it for all users, and the next user who signs in, it'll automatically install from the OS level as being provisioned for all users versus waiting for a user to sign in and for it to get policy to say, oh, you need this app. That's kind of the difference in the experience. We don't need to have an image for it because it's not going to advertise itself to the user in its own portal. We're going to do required for all devices. We're not going to get into all the complexities of filters and things like that at this point. We're just going to let it go. So we're going to make that as a required app. That was the main thing that we just did there. We made it required for all devices. So now we're going to go back over here. Any app that you've got set as required for all devices, and I would suggest that for the most part, unless there's a reason why you wouldn't do this, but if you want to block the device until it's built, you would advertise all of your core applications to all devices or to the correct target group. And then you would just leave this as set to all. Or in my case, like I've got about 20 core apps. Like a lot of them are add-ins like C++ for distributable and junk. Most of that I don't want my users to have to wait on. So what I do is I go in and I select the 5 top apps that I need to be there. The security software, company portal, things like that, Office, things that the user needs to have to get running right away. Set those as your blocking apps if you care. Or you can do all if you don't have a lot of blocking apps. Just know that someday you may add an app that you require and for some devices, and now all of a sudden it's like holding up your deployment. And so plan around this, think about how you're going to do that. I recommend explicitly adding and removing devices from your blocking apps list. You can't set the order here or anything like that. It's just, this is what's going to block.
So that new switch there, the only fail selected blocking apps in technician phase, is really interesting to me. So this is where you're doing autopilot pre-provisioning, and it goes into that technician phase for the pre-packaging or pre-provisioning of the device. You can sit there and go, look, we're only going to fail if these apps fail to install, not all the rest of it.
Yes. And the key thing there is, okay, so we haven't really talked about the pre-provisioning a lot. So when you do pre-provisioning, the idea there is it's going to install all user and device targeted apps that potentially would be required on that device. So if you pre-assign a user to the device, it'll know that all the apps that are deployed to the user. And if you don't, then it'll only target all the apps that are deployed to the device, just like we're doing here. So then you go through that pre-provisioning process and you're going to get stuck for, if you've got all 20 apps required, it's going to wait and install everything that's required at all for that user or for that device. And the blocking apps here has no impact on the pre-provisioning, the number of apps that you wait on during pre-provisioning. Pre-provisioning means you're going to wait on every app. User-driven means you're going to wait on what you configure here. But then this toggle means if you're doing pre-provisioning, only the apps here, which would be like your security tools, are the ones that are going to block or they're going to fail the whole deployment. Otherwise, if you set this to no, then any of those 20 apps that you've got deployed, if any of them fail, you could wait there for an hour and one of them fails, and now you got to start the whole thing over again.
Yep.
Hopefully that all makes sense. Watch it back at half speed if you need to. There's a lot.
Exactly. Test, validate.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. We're gonna do all devices. And
in your environment, you may want to limit that. Don't
to
necessarily
test
follow
group
what
for
we do. Yeah.
Okay, so at this point, we are ready to go for our first tests and things. Hey, Steve, cut the video here. If you're watching and this is in here, Steve didn't do his job.
That is correct. I am Steve, and I endorse this.
Right.
So I think the first one we're going to do is we're going to go through the process of running the PowerShell script that you can download from the interwebs.
All right.
But it should be noted, in the real world, running this script thingamabob, this is not really the way. You get your vendor, OEM, value-added resource to do this for you.
Please get your vendor to register the devices into the tenant. And you can technically do this. You can export it out of Config Manager and put it across. It's not always the latest hash, and we won't go down that rabbit hole, but
yes. So yes, that's actually a really good point. Yes, vendor registration's the way you want to go first. Absolutely. So in the absence of vendor registration, or in the off chance that you need to do random things, like, okay, for us, I'm using Hyper-V to build these demos. And so as we're doing Hyper-V on this, the device is brand new. So how do I register it? So we're walking you through how to do this in your lab or whatever. But ideally, yes, you would have your vendor. And most vendors now, if your vendor doesn't offer this as a service and they don't do it for free, find a different vendor. There's a whole slew of services around this stuff where they'll autopilot them for you and all of these things.
So
figure out how much money you want to keep in your pocket.
I'm going to put it out there. Adam lives in America, where they have the fortunate capability of getting devices shipped straight from the hardware manufacturer. For other countries where you do have partners that are distributing that devices and distributing the hardware to you, they might not have these capabilities, or they may charge for that, and that's just the reality of the services. Do you want to be able to go straight to the manufacturer? Yes, but some markets don't always.
Well, to be fair, Steve, I will do a shout out here to, so we use Lenovo for pretty much all of our devices at this point. And the way it works, we do use a reseller, because we order lots of other things through the reseller. And so being able to bundle your order of all the things is nice. And so there's value add on top of that. That's why they call them VAR, value add reseller. But interestingly, Lenovo does the registration for us at the factory. So when they order our SKU, our custom SKU device, it gets ordered from the factory in Asia, China, I think is where but it's getting registered at the factory before it gets sent to the reseller. In some cases, if you are buying devices off the shelf, or you don't have if you haven't customized a model through your vendor, or through your then you potentially would be buying just a globally available model off whatever the warehouse has on the shelf, kind of thing. Then ideally, your reseller would be the one doing the registration. So that's kind of the different way.
So it also comes down to if you're doing a CTO or if you're not. But anyway, let's not go down the rabbit hole of random conversations again.
Oh, come on. That's the hallmark of this channel, Steve.
Correct. So what we've done here is we've hit Shift F10 as we put up on the nice little banner down the bottom to cover Adam's and my face. And we've brought up a command prompt. Once we've made it to the command prompt, we've typed in PowerShell, which will load up PowerShell. The reason why we're loading PowerShell is because that's where the scripts are located. We're setting the execution policy to bypassed. That might not gel with what your organization wants, but you can control that after the fact with Intune policies. The next part that we're doing here is we're going to go and install a script from the PowerShell gallery called get-Windows Autopilot info.
And technically, it's get-Windows Autopilot info.ps1, but you don't have to include that. It's
correct.
and
And
I've
Adam's
added
selected verbose. You don't need to do that, but Adam wants to show you everything going on, and I'll let him talk.
No, that's fine. You're good there. That's fine. I was going to say, so the execution policy piece, it will get overwritten by whatever policy you have pushed down and enforced later when the device is provisioned. So the risk here is minimal on that. But if you wanted to minimize it, you could use the correct scope there for that. So we're just telling it we want to use the package manager. It's going to go out to NuGet and pull this down. Thing to note here is if you are attempting to do this on your business network and you have a security team that likes to do deep packet inspection, SSL decryption, things like that, or you have things like a network access control, you are going to have to work very closely with them to get this process working on your business network. I'm just saying that, speaking from a whole lot of experience around this stuff. It has been a fun process trying to sort this all out, because like they don't want to trust PowerShellGallery.com holistically because, well, you can get anything from there. They don't want to trust NuGet or WinGet or GitHub. All of those places have code in them that are, stuff. So I get the concern, but it significantly impacts your ability to do things, even the autopilot process. Let's say you did really get all your devices registered from the vendor. You didn't have to do this, but you're still going to have to autopilot. Autopilot will absolutely be impacted if you're doing packet inspection, because you won't have a root cert on your box for the inspection to home to chain to and all that stuff. So lots of things to consider there as you go through this. So at this point, we're going to do get dash Windows autopilot info. And what we can do is there are command line parameters that exist, and you can name the device. Don't do that. You can do it as an output file, which would mean this is going to capture a hash that you can then upload later. Because what we're going to do is do an online component, which will require you to have certain rights in your tenant to be able to do this, rights with graph and stuff. And so if you don't have those rights, you can just output this to a file. One thing that we've seen people do is so Michael Niehaus originally wrote this script. You can run this from a thumb drive, and you can run the same command every time, and it will append to a CSV file on that thumb drive. Yep. And then when you're done capturing all your hashes, you can take those and bulk upload those into the tenant. We're going to do the online feature here, which is great. It's going to allow us to auto upload it. You can even assign it to a group. There's a whole lot of functionality built in here. We're going to do the quick and dirty piece of it, but you can go and read all the docs on more there.
So there's probably one thing to add as well, Adam. If you're being blocked from going to the PowerShell gallery, you can download this offline and run it locally without needing to do that. So while it is a roadblock, it's more of a speed bump than a roadblock.
But then you immediately also need all these other modules. So depending on the level of blocking that's happening.
Well, no. So if you're doing it with Dash Online, you need.
Sorry. Yes, true. Yes. If you're going to do it all completely offline, yes, you can grab it, store it on a thumb drive, and then you don't need to. Yeah.
You can sneak and edit across, or if it's a virtual machine, you just turn it off, mount the VHDX, grab the file, away you go.
Yes.
But if you can, use the online version, because it will save you a whole heap of pain and problems. This is where your organizational conditional access policies could block you as well. Understand that if Adam can get his password right.
I don't even think I had a password, man. What the heck?
Cool.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we're doing this in the online fashion, and you need rights to your tenant. And so if you don't have the rights to do this, to consent on behalf of your organization, you would need to get someone to help you, or potentially your tenant may have the option that lets you submit this and someone can approve it on the back end. Just depends on how it's configured. But you could get stuck here.
Yep.
Okay. So now we are gathering the info, and when this goes, it will import the device into the tenant.
So while we're doing that, Adam, because it's going to take a bit of time, how about we go across to the next VM where we're going to do the JSON import scenario?
Yes. And so there's two different ways we can actually achieve that, even Steve.
There is.
Even Steven. Okay, so would you like me to share my PowerShell machine, or do you want to do it on the demo machine itself?
I think do it on the demo machine, even
Okay.
though we can inject it after the fact. I think it's cool that we're having the ability to do it on the VM. What that means, why I'm saying to do it that way, is what we should do here, Adam, before we get to the next phase and before we go and download the JSON, let's step through to the authentication screen.
Oh, hold on, Steve. Wait a minute.
The other policies
we've planned this really well. No, if we want this to be a cohesive thing where you can just skip from one to the next, we should just wait.
Sure.
So we are going to pause while this finishes. You won't even see this part, ideally. Stand by.
You will, because
Steve won't edit it properly.
Correct. So
Pausing.
probably need to go.
Pausing now.
Probably need to go back to the other VM then, Adam.
Okay. Even if we make plans, we never stick to them. So
correct.
Okay, so there it goes. All right, well, it's already uploaded. Hey, look at that. So you should probably slice a little bit out of this, but if you're listening to this, you didn't, and you just needed to skip past this. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Our device has been synchronized. Now we need to go and see it. Okay. So I need to sorry about the repeated screen sharing situation here. It is what it is.
Exactly.
One of you guys wants to share your screen and show the tenant. All right. Can you see my tenant now?
We can.
Okay. All right. So now we're going back into Intune.
Yep.
So at this point, we expect to see under Enrollment, under Windows, under Devices, we should now see the new device that we just uploaded. This is one that Steve had, and this is the one we just did. And just like that, we already even have a Autopilot profile assigned, which is the one that we intended. One thing to point out here is you'll notice that we already have an Azure AD device ID. And if you click through, we have an Azure AD device object. And that object is already Azure AD joined, but it should be in a disabled state.
Well, and also what you're seeing at the top is the bar where it says this device is Windows Autopilot device.
It cannot be deleted. Yes. Sorry, I'm going to go. I don't know how to do it in the Entra portal. Can you even do it in the Entra portal? Yes.
Yeah.
So if we go here, so if you want to see it, this is what I like to see. You look for the purple guy here and you hover over that and it tells you this is an Autopilot device. So those are all
one thing that should be noted. There is no requirement to enable these device objects. In fact, just leave them alone. You don't touch them at all.
Yeah. And so what I'm going to suggest is that if you are looking through Graph or you're trying to clean this stuff up, if you see a device that says Autopilot device and it's enabled or it's a registered or joined but disabled, you know that's a pending device that's pre-registered in your tenant. When your vendor registers them, this is what you'll see. As soon as the vendor registers them, they will appear in your tenant in this way. And don't worry about them. Those are devices that are now locked to your tenant. And you'll notice that we got our profile assigned because this device is in the all devices group and it got the profile that we already pre-assigned to it.
And I'm going to add an extra statement to what Adam just said there. So when you get the device registered into your tenant, you do need to retire it when it is decommissioned, otherwise or disposed of. Because otherwise, if it is a recycled computer and you hand it out to somebody else, when they go through the out-of-box experience with a Pro SKU OS, they will be prompted, "Welcome to Organization X."
This even happens on brand new devices that get shipped from your vendor sometimes.
So it's worth noting here, and I'll do it quickly. When you send a device in for repair, they will most likely just swap out the motherboard. And when you're registering a device to Autopilot, you're not registering the chassis, you're essentially registering the motherboard.
Yes. And all the chips on it.
Yes, and all the chips on it.
Yeah.
So, and now, and this is a fairly recent feature in Autopilot. You can now select any Autopilot object and delete it without affecting the Intune or Azure AD device objects. It's perfectly fine. You can just pick any of them, delete them. Nothing bad happens.
Yes. And the other thing to know is there's a new feature here that I've experienced a little bit where there's a status column that you can, profile status maybe, where it'll be in a repairing state sometimes. So there's a whole bunch of health check stuff that's happening in this Autopilot service in the background that's helping this out a little bit more now than we had originally when we started down this path. So in some cases, when you've got a motherboard replacement, the device will self-heal. If it's already a device that's in service, there's ways to get around it. It's still a little clunky, but it's getting better for sure. And I do want to actually point out that the Autopilot service, what you're seeing here is so you've got Azure, and then you've got Intune, and then you've got Autopilot. 3 different entities all talking to each other as part of, to make this cohesive thing. So sometimes you need to hit sync here. You get a 10-minute timeout on how often you can sync and all that stuff. But ultimately, we've got a device. It's assigned. It's registered. It's ready to go. So we're going to flip back over. Steve, as mentioned previously, you should get your physical device. Do the same thing with your physical device so we can do the
I've already registered on my physical device.
Why don't I? Oh, is that the one that's already there?
That's the HP device.
Oh, well. Fancy pants. Okay. Wrong machine. Thank you. Comment. I'm not the best at switching
devices.
Yeah, I'm not the best at switching stupid screens here. It's not. Every sharing program is different, man. Okay.
Exactly.
So now, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm sitting at this point and I've just uploaded the device the first time, I prefer to do a full reboot before you
proceed.
You should.
Yep. And the reason why traditionally we've done that reboot is it was the ESP policy, the Autopilot policy was picked up at the device startup. It's now picked up more often than not later, and it will do a constant check, but it's still
But if you're on the internet at this moment, it's going to already start pulling stuff down and know things.
Correct.
So I was just thinking it's cleaner.
That's why it's doing the connection checking for updates. Didn't do that before.
Now, a thing about this, it's pulling down critical updates that may be required. Sometimes there's new updates that make Autopilot work differently and stuff that come down here, critical driver or system updates. Additionally, if it pulls down a policy that has a device rename template like we applied, you're going to get a reboot here as well. Yep. So even if there aren't any updates, you're going to get the device rename is going to trigger a reboot before you even start the Autopilot process. Fun fact, if you later apply a deployment or a CSP to rename devices and you apply it, it will reboot your device. It will trigger a reboot during Autopilot, and that's not a desirable thing. So
no. So what we're saying is don't rename your device.
Correct. Here's what's really, really neat. I got an update on this device, and this is a brand new September patched ISO that I pulled down. Wonder what we just got.
Who's to say?
I bet we can find out.
I'm sure we can.
Look at this. Watch this.
But we don't need to.
We do.
No.
It's still waiting. It's not working yet.
We are going to try to stay on topic today.
No, we're not.
Adam, it's 4 a.m.
Yeah. Okay. So Adam's going to sign in here. As you note, and before we hit next, it actually has all of our corporate branding there, which is super important. You need to make sure that you have that visibility.
Especially this bit.
And also, if you don't see corporate branding here, make sure you've actually created corporate branding, because that's important as well. But with that corporate branding, that is a differentiator to know that your Autopilot profile is assigning. If you don't have it, the policy will still apply. You just don't see the branding.
Here's an interesting thing just to sort of stay really on topic. right, what you're seeing right now is autopilot. And in a few
Correct.
seconds, autopilot will run its course and the enrollment status page will take over.
Apparently
not
not.
the same thing.
I don't know that it worked, guys.
I don't think it did, yeah.
Well,
Uh-oh.
we didn't get an enrollment status page. It doesn't mean autopilot didn't work. We didn't get an enrollment status page, though. Very
Didn't see an
strange.
UBI.
No, we saw the UBI.
I advertised the
got-
enrollment status page to
Yeah.
all devices, and we're getting a hello prompt.
Yeah.
We
But
didn't
that's by
have
default for Windows 11. So Windows
Oh.
11, this is on by default. You need to create an explicit policy to turn that off.
Mhm. Okay, I'm reassigning the ESP to all users and all devices now.
Yeah. Because it probably
Let's see
needs
what
to be to devices as well.
Yeah, and if you repeatedly do this regularly, just do what I do and close that and hit skip for now. Now, I'll
Yeah.
tell you, even if you set your pin, the next time you rebuild this box, you'll get this error, even if everything was good, and you hit try again and it'll work. There's a bug with hello and reusing the same VM. It's funky, but anyway. Here we go.
And-
So this did not do what we wanted it to do.
No.
So
if we go to settings, let's just have a look at see the state that it's in. So under settings, if you go in here and we go to accounts and access work or school, you can see that it's connected to Intune and it is registered into Intune.
yeah, so
So
autopilot works.
If you go back one level for me there, Adam. Yeah. So what you'll see here is we have two options where you have disconnect account and you have info. Where it says managed by Intune training, that is the component where we're sitting there and saying, yep, we're all good. It's registered into Intune. If you don't see that, you need to investigate.
Why does it keep
'Cause you
closing
can-
it on me?
I don't know. Let's click on info now, though. So
Okay.
what you can see in there is we now have an application that download is in progress for, which I'm assuming is going to be our company portal, as well as our security policies are applied. So if we go to start and we go all apps, do we see? No, it's still not there yet. But what we'll see up here there eventually is going to be company portal and it's going to set everything up. The ESP policy didn't apply. My assumption is going to be that we needed to target all devices and all users. So Adam's going to go and look at the log files because he can't help himself.
No, I'm
to
just
see
I'm
what's
waiting
downloading.
because I know this is the next thing we're going to do.
Is it
So-
really?
Here are where the logs would be, and if you needed to troubleshoot, how are we going to talk about troubleshooting if we don't have something to troubleshoot?
True.
And we have a perfect opportunity right here.
Yep.
Except these logs are unreadable by the naked eye. You need CM trace. Just get a copy and always stick it on
Yeah.
all your devices because whatever.
Yes.
Anyway, somewhere in here it'll tell you what's going on. But by the time we figure it out, company portal will just be here and be working.
Yeah.
so-
So if you hit start again for me there, Adam,
Mhm.
what you're going to see is the Microsoft Intune management extension is there. So
Yes.
that's the application that was downloading.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was proving by going here. The fact that you have Intune management extension logs also
Yeah.
indicates that it is working and it's here.
Yeah.
So all of that.
So if we go back to settings, what we should see in there is if we go back up on a level and then we click on there, go info, and you'll see enforcement complete. So for whatever reason, we haven't had the company portal install. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to, on the VM there, Adam, is we're going to go to intune.microsoft.
I want to just reset the box and do it again.
I know you just want to reset the box, but let's have a quick look and talk the customer through or the viewer through the process of going to intune.microsoft.com to understand what the device looks like. So if we then go and select the devices on the left-hand side, we go to all devices, what we should see there is the first device with our, easy to read serial number for the device name. So we click on that. And you'll note that the device name isn't the actual same as the serial number because the hyphens are removed and then it is reduced down to 16 characters. Because that's the maximum length you can have for a device name.
It's
Anyway.
interesting that it goes from right to left.
It'll
Or
always
in the middle.
start
It
at
doesn't. Yeah.
It'll always start at the end and come back.
I think that's a feature of the Surface devices where their serial numbers are. You had to go from the tail end instead of the front part, or something along those lines, and or vice versa. I don't know, but anyway, that's how they do it for Hyper-V anyway.
Yep. So then, let's have a look on the left-hand side, and we scroll down, Adam, and we're going to go to Managed Apps. Managed Apps has the visibility of applications that are available to the device, and you can see that it's saying, "Yeah, look, we're getting there. Don't stress. We will get there." But the next one that we're going to have a quick look at,
And look, it's already there.
Yeah.
It's here.
So let's go and have a click on the enrollment option there. And this is where we can see how the process went for the provisioning. And you'll note
it says it applied it.
It says it deployed the default profile.
Oh, yeah, it did do default.
Yeah. And then what you'll note for the first one is the device type enrollment. So this is the 3 policies that are important. I believe the last one's going to be Autopilot. We just haven't displayed it well. So the first one is, these are the restrictions that were enforced during that enrollment process. The second one is the enrollment status page that applied to the device. In this case, the default one. And then the last one is going to be your actual Autopilot profile, potentially. Or that could actually be the ESP profile that's assigned to the user anyway. So we can see the device is registered successfully and we're happy. What we're going to also do is we're going to right click on the Windows icon there for me, Adam. And we're going to go to Computer Management. And we're going to go to Local Users and Groups. And we're going to select Groups and we're going to go to Administrator. What you should see here is only 3 members because Adam's account wasn't automatically added into the administrator group during the out-of-box experience because Autopilot profile applied to stop that from occurring.
And these 2 SIDs are what?
One is the Global Administrator, and the other one is...
what is it called now? The Device Administrator role or something?
Cloud Device Administrator.
Yes.
In Azure Active Directory.
In
Did I get it right, Adam?
No,
Sorry.
it's Entra.
Entra. But did I get the name of the group right?
I have no idea.
The role, sorry. It's the third one from the top.
At the bottom. You can expand this at the bottom. Or this, yeah.
And then if you go here, we go
looking for the roles. There we go.
Roles. Yep. And then if we just search for device, because it'll take us ages to scroll through.
No, it's this one. Azure AD join device local administrator.
There you go. It got renamed as well.
No, so fun fact, it takes on different names depending on how you get to it. So if you look at it here, Azure AD join. Hang on. If you go back into devices and you go, where's our device settings? I don't know how to navigate this. There we go. Device settings. Here we go. And if you do this guy here, where is it? Not that one.
I think it's this one. Manage additional.
Yeah, scroll down. There, manage additional local.
Yeah, that one. The group or the role that it. Oh, it's not. It's just calling. Let's just call it device administrators. Even then, it had a different name before that. So
then it's saying you can use also assign built-in roles to groups now. So that's nice.
Yeah, but anyway, okay, there you go. All right. So when you're here, it's device administrators, and even then, it used to have a different name for that. So whatever. it is the other group here, and you can add additional
Yep.
people. By default, your Intune administrators become members of this group.
Correct.
And I would say, have limited access to that group, and also don't try to use PIM for this, because you have what's called a primary refresh token, and it could take up to 4 hours to get that token. And I doubt any user who needs you to use your admin rights is willing to wait for that generally. So
Exactly.
okay. And then we got company portal, and
we can see if we got access to company resources, which we will talk about with compliance policies at a later date.
Okay. So I'm going to revert this box because I can. It's already still registered with Autopilot. We don't have to go delete it out of Intune or anything like that. It's all of this will just work. And we will see if we can get the ESP to trigger, just to complete the picture here on what it should look like.
Yes.
I can't say that it's, I don't know when the last time I saw a device not get the ESP. Especially like it's frequent to get this where you don't get a profile, an Autopilot profile, but like weird to not get the ESP at all.
I think if anything, this just shows how incredibly fast Windows provisioning can be, depending on the choices you make.
Yeah, because if you didn't care about any of the stuff, you're like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm at the desktop, ready to go.
This can take 50 minutes if you want. It can also take 50 seconds.
Oh yeah.
Entirely up to you. That is really, there's no right way or wrong way to go about this. You don't need to pile every application you have into Autopilot ESP.
Yeah, we have a term that we've been using during our provisioning of basically we're trying to get a user ready for business. And so what are the things that are most important, most critical to get a user ready for business? And so if you move into a model where like, okay, all of your data, everything's in the cloud, OneDrive's in the cloud, your Office is in the cloud. I mean, you don't even need to have Outlook installed anymore. I know a lot of companies aren't even doing that anymore. You're not installing the fat client of Office. You're just here, go to the Office portal and go do it.
Exactly.
So as a fun fact, in my production environment, Autopilot takes between 8 and 12 minutes to complete on average.
It's pretty cool.
Mine takes 20 to 30 minutes, and we are installing the whole Office suite, plus we're installing a config manager client as well. And that's only, it takes that long with six apps. Yeah. So here you go. Yeah. So strange. We didn't get the ESP. This is what we should have gotten out of the box here.
It's because we're targeting users, not devices.
Actually, no, we targeted devices first. I checked.
Okay. I don't know.
Don't say fine. I checked the tape, man.
All right.
I did it. Yeah. So I don't know. It was weird. So now we're targeting both. Yeehaw. So ultimately, this is what you could sit and watch and have something to look at. And then what we'll talk about at some point in one of the segments here, this is the device ESP. Is what we would refer to it as that. And then this is the user ESP. And so there's a way to skip the user ESP with a custom policy that we can show how to deploy. And then if you wanted to skip the device ESP, you would just set that in the enrollment status page itself. And we don't have to wait for it because you saw all the stuff we were able to do on the desktop before without having to wait on this.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's what you should be seeing. And then once you get to the desktop, you're good to go. So we're not going to make you sit through this one much longer. We're going to go ahead and shift gears and do the next phase, which should get faster.
So what this is going to be is the ability for us to import a JSON file or add that to the image. Why do we want to do that? Well, you may be converting devices from config manager across, and I don't want to have to go through and register the hardware hash, etc., etc. So this is how you can ensure that they're going to get the correct policies and configurations associated.
A great example is we do this today in production. We have devices that exist that are likely already pre-registered in Autopilot because we've got the assignment set to register them in Autopilot. But just to make sure, we are applying the JSON file during the re-imaging task sequence where we're just laying down a new Windows OS on the box. So it's a great option at that stage.
Yeah. And one of the things to note, previously you didn't have the ability to add in AAD groups and things like that. Now you can, based upon the JSON injection process. And you can auto assign policies and configurations.
Fun fact, you can't do paste into an admin window, apparently, from the typing on the clipboard.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm doing at this point is so you can just do this. You would normally do this from a you go ahead and build this on your normal machine and write the code to export this JSON file. And if you don't change your Autopilot profile, you never really need to do this a second time. You just save that JSON file and reuse it.
Yep. So Adam, what we'll get you to do on the view is just change it to word wrap for us. Format
word wrap.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I'll break it into different lines so that you can see where the pieces are here. Okay, about that.
Perfect. Either works.
Okay, so we need to install the graph module, which is going to take a moment. So let's get that rolling.
Yep.
And for those of you watching and wondering, an actual real Autopilot profile in Intune will always overwrite that JSON file.
Yes. Which is interesting because in the scenario that we talked about earlier, if your device is registered to the wrong tenant, you can't overcome that by putting a new JSON file in it.
Nope.
You can't even rip it all out or anything. You can't.
Nope.
No way around it.
Yeah, literally, you have to raise a support case with Microsoft. Or if you know somebody over at that organization, just ask them to remove the device for you. So yeah, obviously right now we're installing the Microsoft Graph module. It's a little bit bigger than it used to be, and it takes a little bit of time to process and do everything associated. If we go back to the notepad, Adam, what we can do is we can talk through what we're doing with the Connect. So you'll see the option for scopes there, and there's a whole heap of different permissions that are being granted. This is where it's granularity of permissioning and accessing to make sure that you don't need to do everything, if that makes sense. So rather than saying, well, my PowerShell module has full access no matter what when I authenticate, you always now have to provide, what actually do you need to do with these credentials? How do I connect? And what are you going to do with it? So yeah, that's the important thing to remember is if you're going to do anything in Intune on PowerShell now, you need to have the scoping correct. You need to make sure that, and you can confirm that when you've run these tasks, more often than not nowadays, they will fly back and go, hey, error, you don't have permission to this. You need to go and add this scope.
It's good to know. That way it's least privilege at runtime. You have to specify exactly what you need.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, so this is taking a moment. So this is why you would do this in advance.
Exactly.
But we want you to just
Or at
enjoy
least add the dash
every bit of
purple
it.
so you can have something pretty to look at.
Yes.
Yeah. So all it's doing, as we said, is downloading a JSON file and injecting it into the device. If we go back to the notepad, Adam, what you'll see is actually putting it into a location called C Autopilot for the demo. What we could do to make it so the process is seamless is we can put that into the C Windows provisioning folder, I believe it is, Adam.
Yeah. That should be about right. We'll find out in a minute, huh?
Yeah.
This is taking so much time. It's nuts.
Yes, it is.
Luckily,
we'd realized
the
we
power
would've-
of editing.
Except not likely.
Correct.
There you go.
There we go.
So
Done.
next step, we're going to connect.
Yep. So this is the same as what we did on the other device, just quicker here. Well, quicker on the other device because it was unlimited. You need to import. And you need to set execution policy, Adam.
I think that's always just going to be the thing.
Yep.
Yep. That's the deal.
Correct. And we hit enter.
And at this point, it's going to ask me to sign in.
And this will honor your conditional access policies. So if you have MFA requirements, you'll be required to put in MFA credentials.
Or, as we discussed earlier, if you're trying to do this on the business network and you can't, and then you have a non-business network that you're doing this on, but your admin account that you're trying to do this with can't log in off the business network, then you have to set your regular account that can log in off the business network with the rights to do device enrollment. So fun stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's unexpected. We copied this right
yes.
off of their page. We didn't. Maybe we need to install another. We need to install a module, don't we?
Yeah, potentially.
Probably. Is there one called Get Autopilot Info, Autopilot Profile?
Oh, I went through this recently. I can't remember what the process was. Just bear with us, callers.
I'm just going to take a guess that might be it. You shouldn't do this though randomly.
This should
typing
be
in
included
module
in
names.
the. This should be included in the
graph
Get
thing.
Windows Autopilot Info module.
Yeah, I think there's actually an updated one for.
No,
I
that's
think
not.
there's actually a longer command.
I think you're right. Well, there's the one I'm thinking of is the Get Windows Diagnostics Info, Windows Autopilot Diagnostics.
So what you're wanting to do, I believe, is you want to do get dash. Hang on, let me bring up a PowerShell command.
We didn't test this in advance because we wanted to give you the full experience, and here we are.
So the string's going to be Windows Autopilot deployment profile. So Adam, if you go in PowerShell, if you do find dash command.
I mean, okay.
Then what we're going to do is we're going to do quotation mark asterisk autopilot, asterisk quotation mark, enter. And this will bring back anything that has a command that has autopilot in there, and it's not there. What I'm going to do is going to go and hit up and then add dash module Microsoft.graph.intune for me, Adam.
Hold on. I found the page, Steve. There's a whole page dedicated to this that we've completely missed, apparently.
Okay.
So you would think. Clearly, we haven't run this in forever.
Yep.
Stand by. gonna copy and paste a bunch of crap.
Well, it should be just replacing that one line there.
I'm just gonna show you what all they have in this other page that they're saying
Yep.
you need to have. So we could have
So
saved
set-
ourselves on the
all of the Microsoft
graph stuff. You could have just gotten what we needed. This is the one
Yep.
we need. This is the one that's killing us.
Yep.
Yeah. So, right. So then just much like the new AZ module, you can tell it the sub module you want to import, and you don't have to
Correct.
do the whole thing. So we could have gotten just the individual bits. But interestingly, they have that in the previous step in the docs, on the previous page in the docs, because that makes a whole bunch of sense.
All I heard there was, Adam, you're doing a pull request to get that fixed.
Man, tired of doing that.
It's fair enough.
Okay. So waiting some more.
There we go.
Okay. Now let's try it. We're already connected to graph. Now it should get the profile for us. There we go. And if we do $autopilot profile, we should see the whole profile. Look at that.
Correct.
Ooh, look at that.
And you can see all the configurations associated with it.
And now we
Pretty
want to
cool.
tell it we want to go to target directory. And then for every profile that you get, it's going to go create an output file.
Does the
The
remind me,
file
Adam,
name is, oh, there it
it's
is. No, that's
important.
right. No, that's right. It's good.
good. Is it?
Yeah, it's fine. It's weird, but it's
Has it created a folder in that?
yeah.
It
Maybe
has.
because that's not where we want it to be.
Yep. So what we've done here is we've just gone to Explorer or Windows Explorer, and we're just copying that into the folder above.
The fun thing about being here is that you can launch anything you want to launch from here.
In default user 0, that has a very limited scope of permissions,
I know, but
but you can do stuff.
like this.
And MS settings is very cool.
And then you can go do Windows Update. So let's say
Don't.
I'm not
do
going to
Windows
click it right
Update.
now.
No, I'm making the point to the end user, to the person who is consuming this. In your lab, sure, use check for updates if you're wanting an explicit update. Don't install feature updates because it will break the OS.
Steve, you cannot install feature updates while in.
You
used to be able to.
That was a long time ago.
And the other part is going through here. I've seen it more than once where organizations, service desks, and help desks or desktop field services then build this into their work profile and I need to do this for every device, and it becomes the thing. So be very sparing in showing people that you can do updates at this point, because you have well-meaning IT admins that will go, oh, but I just want to make sure it's fully updated before my end user touches it. It's like they don't need to stop. So anyway,
so
over.
Where I was headed with this, Steve, was to say just that. If you need to rebuild a box from a bootable media and you don't have the drivers, we have found that some devices, they need drivers to function, and this would be a way to get drivers injected before you start autopilot, that kind of deal. So it's nice to know that this is an option if you just desperately need it. But agreed on all of the other points, because that absolutely becomes a thing. Okay, at this point, we have a box that has an autopilot file on it. Hopefully we've got it in the right place and it's named right. We will find out in a moment. And we're going to reset the box like we did with the other one. And while that's happening, we should point out that there is a whole autopilot for existing devices workflow in the docs that goes step by step through this whole deal, probably in a faster manner than we have. It's only 10 pages, though.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Now,
Cool.
there's also a place in the event viewer that you can go and see whether or not the device has already seen and consumed its JSON file, and you can go and view it in the registry as well.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to go find that right now, but it does exist.
Exactly. So it looks like it's doing something different than normal.
Oh, it's still just getting some updates again.
Yeah, but that happens when you apply the autopilot profile. Why is this doing this? Why does it need a restart again, Adam?
Oh, because
What did you do to it?
we gave it a device name.
Oh, that's right. Device names. They're evil. Don't use them.
It would have gotten a reboot with the updates anyway. Stop
Sure.
it. Man, get off that
So-
high horse, dude. Come on.
So while we're all sitting here and watching this, it should be noted you can only have one JSON file on the device.
Correct.
You cannot have multiple. You cannot choose between them. No
And-
such thing.
Oh, you can
Right.
only have one even assigned to it in the console, in the Intune console too.
Yeah.
And it, good luck.
Yeah.
So that's why it makes it fun when you're trying to explicitly target things. Hey, look at that. Now this device is not registered in our tenant, but it's about to be.
Yeah.
I need to set up MFA on
Cool.
this thing so I can just click OK to a thing.
Exactly.
All right.
But
When
that
we see
looks
that
like it's all up
ESP,
and
we're
running.
going to be in good shape.
Yep.
And there it is. So we're going to expect that that's going to work, and we're going to expect that you will have watched the other video to show all the outcome there. All right, Steve, you're up.
All
We're
right.
going to do pre-provisioning
Me?
now.
Okay. Who put me in charge?
Well, you have a physical device.
I do. So what we've got here is a nice simple HP device. You'll note that we're at the out-of-box experience screen. The reason why we're at the logon screen is because the autopilot profile has been assigned to the device. And then what we have is I'm hitting the Windows key 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it comes up with, hey, do you want to do stuff? And we have the ability to install a provisioning package, which is pretty cool. But that's not what we want to do. What we're wanting to do is we're wanting to use the pre-provision with Windows Autopilot. This will go through and set it up so all of the applications and settings to assign to the device will apply, including compliance policy, which we'll talk more about in a minute. So we've just selected that. We're hitting next and we're checking for updates because we need to make sure that we're fully up to date, even though we've already checked to see that we're up to date. Part of this process is it safe? Is it secure? Is there anything that needs to be changed? We're now going to step into the pre-provisioning process. So we've got the autopilot user driven. We don't have a user assigned. If we wanted to, we could assign a user to it. And then we can go in and review everything where that's at if you've got the companion app installed.
And to
Feel free to have a scan if you want.
if you needed to register or assign a user to it, you would do that in the device provisioning node where your device, your
Yeah.
autopilot devices are registered. You would go in there and there's a user node option that you can assign it there.
Exactly.
It's not the same as your Intune assigned primary user,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
It's the autopilot device assignment. So we're just going to hit next. And now this is going to go through and run the ESP, which is nice and awesome. So this is going through and doing that device preparation and securing the device, setting it all up. So while this is stepping through this process, it shouldn't take too long, but we can talk about the advantages and disadvantages of using autopilot pre-provisioning. And one of the big disadvantages of using this is your compliance policies are applied when this is going through. And your grace period starts from when your compliance policy lands on the device. If you have a requirement for BitLocker to be enabled, that occurs when the user signs into the device, because it needs to happen in the user context, so then they have the ability to access the BitLocker keys at a later date. So if you pre-provision this and then you wait 2 days to hand it to the user and your grace period is 8 hours, the user can't sign into the device. Or when they do sign into the device, they have limited access to resources and they have a bad user experience. So it's something to understand and realize, well, there is advantages, but there's also some big disadvantages. What this model is designed for is to have the ability to pre-stage a computer in a key high demand, high impact role where if you can't change out that computer in less than 10 minutes, they're going to be very unhappy and you're going to lose money or people are going to be impacted in some way. That's what it's designed for. I hear it's used for other reasons. Do you guys have any insights on that?
I think in my environment, it's mostly used just to irritate me, I think.
Yeah.
I've never used this in production. I've tested this in production, but I gave up on it. It was the user-driven process was simply a lot faster, and the user didn't mind waiting 10 minutes. They would just sign in, grab a cup of coffee, come back, and they would see their desktop basically.
Yeah, I've seen it where I think we talked about it earlier, like we just don't want to impact the user, and so we insist on doing this for them. I've been very much trying to promote a different way of doing IT, doing desktop work like this. I don't see a lot of value in stacking up a bunch of boxes on a bench in an IT workroom anymore, like we're going to image them. And that's exactly the boat that this puts us back in. Of now I've got a dependency on the IT staff to do my imaging on behalf of a user for a process that was built for the user to do it on their own. And that feels silly to me that we would still insist on doing this for them. Once again, Steve already threw out the caveats there. There are cases where this is beneficial. I'm not saying don't use it at all.
I agree with you on that.
Use it sparingly. It should be a tool in the tool belt. It shouldn't be the only hammer you've got, though.
There have been customer cases where they get the OEM to do this for them at the factory.
Yes.
And then they get a whole pallet of laptops and they sit on the shelf at the IT department for 6 months.
Oof.
Well, during those 6 months, the compliance thing goes out the window. The MDM certificate on the device may have expired, and you're just not in a fun place.
Well, it's also all of the applications that you pre-staged with this process more than likely will have had an update. So all of the advantages you were trying to make basically disappeared.
Yep.
That's pretty cool. We got it done in 4 minutes.
That's how long it takes to install Intune management extension in company portal, apparently. Make a note.
Yep. And register it into Intune. So when we hit reseal, what will then happen? I was expecting the green screen, but I'm guessing that must have been replaced.
That doesn't happen anymore. Yeah, I had the same experience, Steve, because the last time I had done it was with the green screen. And I was like, oh, where is that? Why am I not seeing it? Because remember, there used to be a deal where you could go into the desktop. At this point, you could log into the desktop and do things manually, and then reseal it and resys prep. That's not a thing anymore. You can't do that.
It literally just shut down my computer after the reseal.
That's correct. Yes. And so the idea is at this point, so like you could have scanned that QR code to then turn into a printout you'd stick on the box or whatever for the user that's assigned to it or not assigned. And then you'd seal this back up and you hand it to a user, say, here, your device is ready to go. And then you get an Autopilot Lite screen where it looks like they're about to go through Autopilot. It's the same experience. But it just goes right into the desktop. Now, challenge here is we have not turned off the user ESP. And so what's going to happen is when you sign in, you're still going to get stuck at the ESP for a short time while it's doing whatever it's doing to process that.
Correct. So I'm just powering up the laptop again now. It'll take a little bit. Once that comes up, we'll then be able to go through, as Adam said, the out-of-box experience. For the end user, the experience is the same, which is the nice part, right? So us as IT, we can take out some of that time and make it quicker for the end user. But if we sit there from a value proposition for an IT staff member sitting there and hitting the Windows key 5 times on every computer as it goes out the door, and then sitting there and watching it go through that process, compared to every employee in the organization spending that same time doing it themselves, at what point do you have that conversation with your leadership of, well, I'm paying Joe in the corner just to hit Windows key 5 times. Is there real value in that compared to I could repurpose him to be going and educating staff, and in 6 months' time, he moves into a more senior role because he's got interpersonal skills and capabilities as a result of that.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing to think of here is, let's say you have 20 people start on a specific day, 20 new employees, 20 new computers. You could hand all 20 of those devices out, and all of those users could image, could autopilot in parallel while they're getting onboarded by HR and doing all the paperwork and things.
Yep.
And by the time they get back to needing to even touch their device, it's already ready to go. Or you could wait for an IT staff member to set this on a bench and power them all on weeks in advance. Oftentimes you don't have that luxury. And wait for them to do it, and then wait for them to schedule a time to meet with the user to do to me that there's so many just really nice user experience pieces of this that make it worth. And honestly, I think it just comes down to user education, like just setting an expectation with the user and saying, hey, look, this is a different way we're doing this. It's going to take a few minutes. Not all of your stuff's going to be there right away, but you can get to your desktop. You can go to the web portal and go get your email and start working on docs right away. You can join your Teams meetings from the browser, just all of that kind of stuff. If you set those expectations up front, a lot of times your users will buy into it and no big deal. But it absolutely, I think, is a top-down type selling point. Like you've got to get management to buy in on this experience as well.
I'll add one thing to that. That especially with the youngest generation of employees that we have, like on my organization, they have provisioned their own phones. This is basically the exact same process. You sign in, stuff starts happening, and you just have to wait 10, 15 minutes, whatever. They don't care. They say, oh, I'm just setting up a device. This is exactly what I expect. I've done this before.
Exactly. And that's exactly it, right? Every person has spent the time building out a computer at home, setting up a mobile phone, setting up an iPad. Gone are the days of, I'll just bring the local computer guy around and they'll sort out my computer for me. And I don't need to do that out-of-box experience because it's so complicated. The distributor's already done it. Nowadays, it just gets shipped, and as an end user, you still go through that out-of-box experience. So it's something that's important. So I'm just going to hit skip for now on setting up my face recognition, and I'm going to click OK. And as we said, the reason why we're seeing the Hello for Business prompts is because we have not explicitly disabled it, and Windows 11 has it enabled by default. So I'm just going to close this as well because I don't want to set it up this time.
And if
we're
you
gonna
needed
skip it
to,
out.
if you needed to skip it, or if you needed to actually suppress it, deploying a disablement policy would be the use case here. But there you go. So you've pre-provisioned, you hand it to user at the desktop, good to go. As we mentioned, if you had user targeted apps, they would have installed if you had targeted or already pre-assigned this device to the user. The thing that we haven't shown, and we'll probably have to do it at another point, is how to disable the user ESP. There's a troubleshooting docs page that covers that we can maybe get into the description on this video if we get lucky.
Exactly.
Please, Mark. Please, Mark. Anyway, so there you go. So we've done that one. VM number 3. This is going to be a personal device. So I've literally set up a new Microsoft account, signed in. Like a new Microsoft personal account. I'm not connected in any way to the company, and this device doesn't know about Intune, none of those things. So here you go. I'm signed in with my new email address that I'll never log into ever. Send me all the emails you want.
Yeah, just sign up for everything.
Yeah, send me free things. Okay. All right, so here's the deal. At this point, there's kind of a couple different ways you could achieve this. If we were to, let's say, I'm going to show this before I do this.
So one thing to note, and I want to call this out up front, is it needs to be a pro or enterprise or education SKU for this to work.
Oh, yes, correct. So, and it is, this is a pro SKU. So good call. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign in. I think I'm going to do this. I'm going to set up a new work profile because I want to show you a kind of back to our point on, wow. Thank you so much for all the opportunities to click messages. Okay, here we go. Okay. So I'm going to set up a new work profile in Intune. And what I want to do here is show you the risk of leaving personal device enrollment open for Windows.
Do it.
So this would be your home user just trying to sign in to get his email or, whatever. And right here, what a weird dialog box this is.
Yep.
For years, this has been the most baffling dialogue that has never been changed. So this checkbox is checked by default. Allow my organization to manage my device. That basically says, I want you to do all the things you do to your corporate devices to my home personal device. That's what that's doing. So what they're asking you is, do you want to stay signed into all your apps? And if you say, sure, that'd be great.
Of course.
Because I want to use Office everywhere on my computer and have it talk to the corporate. Right. Great. Except this checkbox makes that also manage your device. And if you don't have good fencing in Intune to prevent it from messing with users and deploying the wrong policies and allowing you to wipe them and take ownership, you do not want to leave this open. So now at this point, if we had our policy blocked to prevent personal device enrollment and a user hits OK here, it will fail. There will be a failure message. But since it's open, this will register it. So I'm going to not do that. And then if I uncheck that, then I will stay signed in if I hit OK, or I can say, no, just sign into this app only. Okay. So the difference here is if I hit no, this app only, it's not going to sign. It's not going to leave the device, my user profile here in the OS. It's just going to leave it attached to the app here.
So me personally, I hit the no sign into this app only.
Yeah.
Because I have so many different accounts. I want to make sure that it doesn't bleed between all of the different profiles that I'm running. But in your environment where you've got a single device or single account, you may want to go, okay, no matter what, sign in. But it all comes down to how you want to set up.
Yeah. But so there you go. I've signed in with my personal account, and now coming soon, in MAM for Edge in Windows is coming. So you can actually apply work profiles to, if somebody did this on their personal device, now we can apply a policy targeting Edge only, which is really cool.
Yep.
Okay, so now assuming
and you can also block it with conditional access.
Yes. Now, assuming we want to do this the right way, and this is how we want to onboard this device, or a way, not the right way, but a way, we would come here and hit connect. And right here, you've got this option, join this device to Azure Active Directory, which is pretty cool.
And now you need to do it again.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
The first one will register the device, but this one will join it. And there are
correct
significant differences between the two.
And I guess the main thing here is that Intune doesn't really, or Windows and Intune don't really have a great BYOD story. No. They don't have good fencing between them and segregation between classes of devices. Yeah. So here we go. We're going to say join. And this only works because my account is enabled to do that. Sorry, go ahead, Jóhannes.
So you need to. So for organizations that want to allow personal enrollment, allowment of personal devices, you need to plan for that from the beginning.
Yes.
You need to set up the fences. You need to set up your policies and scoping, and you need to be very conscious of what you're targeting, how, when, and where, because you really don't want to take drastic actions on devices you do not own.
So check it out.
I'd agree with that 200%.
So currently I don't have anything deployed to me at this point. But if we were to go to the Intune portal, and I need to switch my profile back. Good thing I signed in already. Oh, it's just asking me some more. It really cares. It's already doing it. Okay, so leave me alone already. Okay, so I'm gonna go in. We're going to, oh my God. So this is why you want to register it with the whole device. Oh my gosh, this is insane. Okay, you know what? We're gonna do that other thing.
You need to do a restart.
Yeah, we're just gonna do
registered it.
So it says just do switch account, switch user.
Yep.
Okay, and now you can sign in with.
And to note, this is creating a new user profile on the device. If you've previously been using the device for a while with that local account, porting all of that data across is an adventure.
Now, I don't know if our viewers caught it, but when we set up our Autopilot profile, they were configured to convert all targeted devices to an Autopilot.
Oh, look, there's that
Autopilot.
There's that thing I kept saying.
Yeah, now you see DSP. So this device is now in Intune and Azure AD, and we're targeting all devices with an Autopilot profile that will convert that device to an Autopilot device. So it would take up to 24 hours, but this virtual machine would become it would be enrolled into Autopilot. Now, do you want that to happen for a device you do not own?
No. Yeah. So this is where you need to be very clear with the Autopilot profile that you've deployed, and only deploy to devices that are registered in your tenant. Yep. So because we went and used the all devices group, that's why we've been able to change this device into a Autopilot device. Because I reckon if we go back to devices there, Adam.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right device.
And go to enrollment on the left-hand side.
Is this the right device, though?
We'll find out.
This isn't the one.
And then we go to Windows, and we're going to go to Autopilot devices. And no, it hasn't come in here yet.
Yeah, it can take up to 24 hours. You really don't want to get caught
So here's one. That's the one that we did earlier. This is the JSON enrolled one. Oh, this is it right here. Awesome sauce. I named it. Yeah, that's why. Okay. So this is the one we're looking for. And so when it shows up in the Intune side, that's what we should see. There it is.
Yep.
So that's what we're looking for. Now, if we go look at the enrollment, I was hoping, see, it normally would tell you if it had an autopilot profile that it was used, and we're seeing this weird, it's a bit stranger than I would expect. In graph, there's a graph call you can do that'll show you the autopilot profile that was used as well.
Yep.
I'm missing something there, but
and also when you go to filters, you can see the autopilot profile.
Oh, that's right.
Device.
Yeah, if we were to build a filter and things. Yep. Okay, so
which is awesome, because then you can use that after the fact when you're assigning the JSON policy.
Yep. Okay, and then just like that, we are sitting here at the screen we've seen 4 times now. Set up autopilot, skip for now, and then we're back at the desktop. Company portal's already been installed. Look at that. It wasn't there a minute ago. And
the branding's down in the tray.
Yeah. And ideally, if we have an enterprise SKU associated with this user account, our Windows system info, I don't know what we've actually got assigned to us.
It's enterprise.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, check it out. So it bumped the SKU even, and we were at Pro before.
Because we're professionals, we definitely showed you that it was Pro previously.
Well, if you were paying attention, you would have seen it just a second ago on the last page I was on the other screen. It was right there.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing. It wouldn't have been enterprise, or I guess it could have if I used enterprise ISO.
Yeah.
But I always make a habit of using. Actually, this is a good note.
Yeah.
Build your autopilot devices as Pro. Don't build them as enterprise. Don't use the enterprise ISO. Build them as Pro. They'll step up when the user applies their licensing.
Yep. And it's also a good way to make sure policies are applying and your licensing is applying correctly.
Yep. Okay. And here we go. We're going to go with the last one. Now, this one, we haven't done anything to. It's brand new out of the box.
Yep.
And we're going to show you what the experience would be if you're a home user doing this on a Pro SKU device. Now, and as we said, like if the users, if you're buying a device off the shelf at a big box store, it's going to be home anyway. I'm not going to have the opportunity to do this here. So I mean, from a risk perspective, unless somebody's intentionally trying to join a Pro device, there's a lot less of a risk of somebody or you're joining a personally bought device into your tenant, but I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying like a lot of the home use devices that come with home on them.
Yeah.
The nicer higher end devices tend to come with Pro.
Yeah.
And it is somewhat common. I don't know how it is in the US, but here it is somewhat common that you can buy a device through your employer, so you get their discount.
Yep.
And then you basically get a enterprise grade laptop for home use.
Unless your supplier that they bought it from
for
accidentally maybe registered it to your autopilot tenant.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't need to put a name here, but we're putting a name because we're awesome.
With one S, because I can't add another. I've maxed out.
No more than 15 characters.
Yeah.
It also should be noted, at least, especially with the older generation, not to be ageist, but this is just a matter of fact. Their corporate email might simply be the only email they have.
Yep.
So when they get asked to sign in, they'll just use what they know and have.
Yep.
And because I named the device, we got a reboot out of that.
Correct.
Okay, so here's our decision point. We can do personal, or we can do work or school.
Yep.
So on the previous one we did, I had set it up using personal and doing work or school. We've got options here. Now, notice there's no branding. This is the difference.
Exactly.
So if you boot a device up and you don't get any branding, well, you may have done something wrong.
Check your company branding. If that's actually active, then more than likely it's not Intune registered.
Well, actually, so what we've seen here, so the previous screen, this screen it would be the next screen you would see if the device is not registered into a tenant at
Correct.
all. So if you don't see this screen and it goes and you see this screen first, then you know it's registered into someone else's tenant, or it's not, or you don't have your company branding set. So
correct.
Either one of those things could be true at that point.
The other thing that we'll just quickly call out here, because we've gone down so many different tangents, Adam, if you hit the sign-in options text and hit domain join instead, what you have is the ability to go and sign into the device locally without providing an email account, whether it's a corporate email account or a personal email account. That's how you bypass needing to be cloud joined for Windows 11.
Yeah, because if you go the personal route, it still requires a personal Microsoft account. So that's how you would just say, hey, I don't want to cloud join anything. Yeah, that's how you would do it. Good call. And it says domain join, but you don't have to actually give it a domain. And you can just give it a username and no password, and you just get in. I mean, let's go back to...
Yes. And if you do put in a password, then you have to put in secret question answers. So it's easier just to put in no password.
And there you go. We are, so, you know, the ESP is still here because we told it to show the ESP for all Ubi devices. And so we're still getting it, which is kind of cool. If you wanted this, but yeah, same deal. The device will get joined to the business network and we should see it shortly.
So the big difference here is once we get in, this account will have local admin on the device and only on that device, not any other device. It should be noted on the personal one that we went through just last, that account will be a local admin on the device as well, because we've not explicitly said not to do that unless you go and deploy a policy after the fact from Intune to remove local administrator.
Yes. And I've just confirmed that it is, in fact, true on the other device that we did. Okay, so this device should be registering into our network now, and we're going to let that bake. You can trust us that it worked, or we can, at this point, you've seen it a bunch. We've already demonstrated that we've been able to do this on each one of them. You would just come back in your Intune portal and wait for it to show up, and it'll be here eventually.
Exactly. What you might find is
actually this is it.
It's done its initial registration.
In progress. Let's go back over here. Let's see. There it is. So it's already showing here, and it already knows it's registered as an Autopilot device too. It tagged it that way, so that's cool. And it'll show up in Intune in a moment whenever it hits that stage. But if we go into our enrollment and go back and check, we should ideally see it. It may need an Autopilot service sync in order for it to actually show up here, but it's at least tagging it that way on the way in. So that's pretty neat. So it knows that it intends to do that. There they are. Look at that. So this one we manually added. The other ones came in because we told it to with that assignment profile from earlier. There you go. So that's like 5 ways to provision a Windows device. I'm exhausted. How about you guys?
Same.
Well, it's 5 a.m. It's not that bad.
It's 12 a.m. for me, man. I don't know. Jóhannes is in Iceland, and so he wakes up in the middle of the early morning to participate in these videos. So Thanks, Jóhannes, for
We
hanging
do
with us.
appreciate it.
It's fun stuff.
It's easy when I'm in good company.
And look, you can't see it now, but I'm already getting to the desktop on the other device already. So
Perfect.
all right. I've lost my voice at this point. It's going to be a fun week.
Yes, it is.
Thank you guys. This has been a blast. Hopefully everybody finds the videos enjoyable, and feel free to use that fast forward button however you want.
Yeah.
We just want to get the content out there for people who need it, and there's a lot of info. So enjoy.
Exactly. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.